Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Fire Up. My name is Scott Morgan, Rock Motor City Madmouth. Pleased to be joined by Madman Mancini. Mark, welcome back to the broadcast.
Always a pleasure to be on this show, man. On Tuesdays, I call it the Throwdown. I call it whatever you want to call it. I'm just excited to tear up another city, my friend.
Yeah, well, I enjoy going from city to city. Obviously, there's a lot of different storyline and history to everything out there, and every one that we choose out, we put a lot of thought into it, make sure that the show, when it does sweep around the country, that we're able to address a lot of the important ones. There's always a great sports city, great sports heroes, numbers retired, and I always look forward to the challenge of trying to dig into those cities and go from there. All right, well, Mark, obviously we'll look forward to go out there and take a look at the Beltway. If people don't know what the Beltway is, all you need to do is talk about Baltimore, Maryland, and Washington, DC. There's a great sports history between what I consider the Beltway twin cities, if I may add, on the East Coast. So we're going to lead off with Lamar Jackson, who has a sprained PCL, won't be available Sunday's game against your Pittsburgh Steelers. Tylerhuntley will be there replacing him. And I believe it looks like the estimated time for Lamar Jackson's 1 to 3 weeks. So do you think that really Lamar Jackson should have signed that contract extension?
Well, I think he should have. I mean, we saw what Aaron Judge did in New York. Baseball is a little different than football. Football, you get injured much quicker with the contact. I think Lamar Jackson shot himself in the foot on this. This kind of reminds me of the guy with the in basketball. Remember, he was with the Golden State Warriors, and then he went to New Orleans. Oh gosh, you know who I'm talking about. He bet on himself, and he tore his Achilles, and he was signing 1-year contracts. A center.
Yeah, I'm trying to jog my memory there, but
started with a D. I can't think. I had a brain fart on it, but
yeah, what
a prominent center, and he went through some. He was on a career year. He could have got a boatload of money, big contract in the waiting, and that was the end of that. He went on 1-year deals. We saw him go through Golden State, L.A., and who knows what he's doing now. Boogie Cousins. Boogie Cousins.
Yeah, DeMarcus Cousins. Okay, well, Thankfully you have a co-host that's able to overcome some of those little blanks that we tend to draw. Yeah, DeMarcus Cousins to me has a boatload of potential, but boy, he's been, between the issues he's had with coaches and teammates, as well as the injury situation, that's a career that I think could be a whole lot better than it's actually turned out to be. But that's a good example. But Lamar Jackson, obviously, we're talking about sport of football, a very mobile quarterback. A lot of these quarterbacks these days are very mobile. And, you know, as much as you want to bet on yourself, I think the Dallas Cowboys were lucky that Dak Prescott got his money despite the injury situation he had, and that Jerry Jones indeed gave him what he was worth. I believe the right thing will be done by Lamar Jackson, but my goodness, man, anytime you go out there and deal with a mobile quarterback out there, to me, you're one hit away from disaster. And luckily, in this particular case with Lamar Jackson, the injury could have been a whole lot worse. It might be better they set him for 1 or 2 weeks anyways, just to make sure he's properly healed to get ready for the playoffs. I believe they're 8-4 going into this weekend anyway. So, you know, if you can get a win or two out of your backup quarterback, to me, in Tylerhuntley, then you should be in a halfway decent position. I like Lamar Jackson. He's from South Florida anyways. Once upon a time, I'll tell you an interesting story about him. I'm going through physical therapy in Fort Lauderdale. I bumped into his uncle, and his uncle was telling me that Lamar, you know, a little bit about him. We talked some stories out there. He said, my nephew's one of the most humble kids. And boy, when you look at his press conference and the way he carries himself, the way he went in to the year, that I'll bet on myself, I'm going to go there and play and do what I've got to do. I think the only problem that you have with Lamar Jackson is from a character standpoint, you don't have enough of those guys. He's
not only that, I think, you know, the last year or so, you know, personality's kind of changed. I can remember him coming out of college and everything. Right. Now he's kind of, you know, be more direct with the media and stuff. It looks like, you know, it's unfortunate what, you know, being a running quarterback in the NFL. I don't think you last unless you're Fran Tarkenton.
Well, I agree. Yeah, Fran Tarkenton.
That's the big thing right there. He's got, go ask Michael Vick.
Yeah, well, Fran Tarkenton, I wonder how many people in our audience really remember Fran Tarkenton, but I remember the way he used to cause the Detroit Lions a whole lot of problems, let me tell you. But he caused a lot of, but he was a scrambling quarterback and did extend the pocket. The only problem with Fran is nobody simply knew about him, that's all. You know, so to me, but that's a great example. a blast from the past, if we can call it. All right. So the reality is, I hope that Lamar gets healthy well enough, and I believe he'll ultimately get paid. He doesn't have an agent. I don't know whether that sometimes complicates things or not. I don't know. I don't want to go into any more detail now. After all, they only have 12 games under their belt yet. I'm sure this is something that we'll probably address at some point down the road. I don't know, at least on this show or other shows. Everything is very fluent here as well. So, all right, on to the next one. We'll stay with the National Football League. Despite the drama with owner Dan Snyder, Washington Commanders are 7-5-1. They're in playoff contention. Coach Ron Rivera, I think, is doing his best coaching job ever. The guy has dealt with the rebranding situation, the drama by Dan Snyder. So what's your perception of Rivera and the state of the team?
Well, I'll tell you, he's not going to be a George Allen. He's not going to be a Joe Gibbs. He'll never be one of those guys. Those two are Washington monuments. Yeah. Rivera's doing a great job. I mean, there's been a lot of drama surrounding it, the sexual allegations,
right?
Trying to get the new, stadium issues taken care of, discrimination with, people leaving the organization, the name change. Personally, if I was Dan Snyder, I would have never changed the name. I mean, unless you're contributing to the team, you really don't have no say in basically as far as the name change. I would have gave it to the season ticket holders. I could personally say, being a Pittsburgh boy, my favorite NFC team growing up was the Washington Redskins. I still refer to them as the Washington Redskins. And, everybody's got their own opinion, and I'm going to utilize my opinion on it. Watching them from afar and seeing the Redskins Cowboys matchups and everything. And, Jack Kent Cooke was a cheap owner in Washington when he owned the Redskins, but I think Snyder's done an adequate job. He's been getting pummeled for the way, the way he's been, treating everything and all that. But you know what? It's hard enough running the team. I think the biggest thing would have been was he said in 2013, I think, that he wouldn't change the name. He succumbed to it. Sponsors. I would have sold the team before I changed the name. Got to be true to yourself, Scott, before you can be true to anybody else.
No, I understand. Everybody knows the success that Jack Kent Cooke had. Before I give you my opinion on that, I will let our listeners know that the show can be heard on iHeartRadio, Apple, Spotify, Google, wherever you get your podcast. Once again, iHeart, Apple, Spotify, Google, wherever you get your podcast. And if you're also, you can subscribe to the South Florida Tribune YouTube channel so you can see Mark and I, and we'll give your opinions that way. YouTube.com, go to South Florida Tribune, hit the subscribe button, and then you get to see all of us. And not only do you get to see all of us, you get to see all of our media availabilities at home here in South Florida, wherever we go on the road, as well as all the streaming shows and the great talent I have on the South Florida Tribune Broadcasting Network. So with that said, okay, let me respond to what you just had to say, Mark. Okay, number one, Jack Kent Cooke may have not spent a lot of money, but he won. Okay, he did win, and he had some memorable teams. Part two, I agree with you 100%. Changing the Redskins, I think, was a major mistake. It was never a problem for a lot of years until now, the last 5 years or so, it was a problem. You mean to tell me 80 or 90 years it wasn't a problem, and now it's a problem? Really? Now, do we think that Daniel Snyder would have sold the team? No, but the reality is you were right. Okay, Mark, the guy did succumb to sponsors, and that situation is a train wreck anyhow, because not only is FedEx Field in bad shape and he's alienated his fan base. Well, let me tell you, if first impressions were any good, Dan Snyder wasn't good at them, because during training camp, the man charged his customers to see these people train. You can't go charging anybody during training camp. That's when you're supposed to do your best salesmanship. And so Dan Snyder's track record being what it is, isn't good. By the same token, Ron Rivera's job is not to help you rebrand your franchise. It isn't. It's not his job to go out there and stand in front of the podium and try to be Superman with a shield in front of him and protect his owner. His responsibility is to make sure that he puts the best players out on the field to make sure that these guys are producing the way that they are. He finds Taylor Heineke. He's done a really good job. Yes, he made a move to try to get Carson Wentz. Hasn't worked out. Still a backup, still employed. So Ron Rivera's done an outstanding job, and I think the biggest mistake that ever happened was when the Carolina Panthers let Ron Rivera go. He had good success there. He did. And the Washington Commanders hiring, I think, was a brilliant move too. But the thing is I hope he doesn't get burned out of the situation that he's in. because if he does, it will be a sad, sad shame. Ron Rivera to me is gold. Okay, Dan Snyder, well, you guys can go out there and put in the chat room or wherever you want, okay? Or send us comments at southfloridatribune@gmail.com. Anything that Mark and I comment, and the next time I read it, I'll make sure that gets addressed on our very next broadcast. So, yeah, I mean, the reality is more power to Ron Rivera, Dan Snyder. I think the ultimate goal is they're going to end up selling the team. That's the only chance they have of actually getting a new stadium, because I know that they won't build them one while Dan Snyder's there. I saw games at RFK before, Mark. I saw them at FedEx Field, and from what I've heard on lots of shows, they need one badly, but they're not getting it through Dan Snyder. All right, final topic of the night. Let's talk about the Washington Capitals, something really good. Something special is about to happen. I don't know if it'll be this year or next year, but Alex Ovechkin, my goodness, age 37, 793 goals. Ovechkin does have a Stanley Cup championship under his belt. Who knows how many All-Star appearances? I didn't need to go that far. But Wayne Gretzky is the all-time goals leader with 894. He played from 1979 to 99. Gordie Howe from 1946 to 80. He got 801. And Ovechkin, as I mentioned, from 2005 to 23, 793. So I want to go over the numbers a little again, because I know I probably moved over them quickly. So Gretzky, 79 to 99, 894 is one. Gordie Howe, Mr. Hockey, love seeing him. Glad he was in my neck of the woods in Detroit, 1946 to 80, 801. Who knows how many Iron Man streaks he owned before some of them got eclipsed anyways. And then last but not least, Ovechkin. So obviously we know that Gretzky and Howe are in the Hall of Fame. We know Ovechkin's headed there. So give me your comments about this generational player.
Well, first of all, I'm always consistent across the board with whatever show I'm on, whether it's this one, XM, Philly, doesn't matter. I will tell you this, when you look at the four major sports, and you brought up the name Wayne Gretzky, nobody to me has transferred a sport and kept it on solid ground out of the four major sports than Wayne Gretzky. If Wayne Gretzky didn't come into the league, there wouldn't be no hockey in the West Coast. And now hockey in Seattle and Vegas is flourishing. So no disrespect to Jackie Robinson or Jim Brown or, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar or Magic and Bird or whatever that. And I love Magic and Bird too. But nobody has put a sport on the map. And you can even put Pele in this conversation with Brazil.
Right.
That Wayne Gretzky has transformed hockey. And first of all, them Edmonton Oilers teams were right up there with the Islanders and Canadians. Right. The Capitals, in my mind, have underachieved. They only got one cup to show for it. If you want to sit here and tell me, and I'm not going to be biased on it because I know, to me, Sidney Crosby, I take any day of the week over Alex Ovechkin, because I think Sidney Crosby does more to the game to elevate the game and make everybody better than Alex Ovechkin does. To me, Alex Ovechkin is a Mike Bossy. He's a pure scorer.
Right.
And whether he passes Wayne Gretzky up or not, it's not going to change my opinion. He'll never conquer what Wayne Gretzky has done and put the NHL on a different stratosphere.
Okay.
And that's all there is to it. I mean, this is a guy that can score at will. The league has changed over the years. You don't have dynasties. You got one-year wonders. The Penguins won 2. Tampa Bay won 2 recently. But you don't have the dynasty of the Islanders, the Oilers winning 4 cups in a row, the Montreal Canadiens. And if you stuck Alex Ovechkin into that time warp machine, I think he'd be another Jean Pronovo, Gilles Perreault. And then you look at Gordie Howe. You brought up Gordie Howe. Gordie Howe was great, when you looked at the WHA and all that. And, it was with Detroit too. But I think the NHL at that time, there were some teams that weren't drawn. The Penguins, 6,000 fans. The Kings, 6,000 fans. The California Golden Seals went to Cleveland. Right. Colorado Rockies. There was no hockey out here. The NHL was in a sham. You had Montreal, Detroit, LA, Pittsburgh, and I think another team in one division. So I think Wayne Gretzky had a big hand, and definitely nobody's going to reach that bar in my mind.
Okay. You said a lot of loaded things. I'm going to address them one at a time. Okay. Good stuff. Okay. First of all, I'll go out on a limb and tell you that Wayne Gretzky and Alex Ovechkin wouldn't have nearly as many goals if they played in the original 6 era, because they played each other a lot of times and there was a lot of fighting and it was a lot more physical play, and these guys would get worn out. Now, what you have right now, to me, with the European wide open style play, catered to Gretzky and Ovechkin. Okay, that's what I believe. And I saw, being an original six guy myself, okay, Detroit, I saw a lot of those physical games, those Broad Street bullies out in Philadelphia. Unbelievable. You think that Ovechkin and Gretzky survived the beating that all these guys take? No. Okay. Item number 2, you're right. Alex Ovechkin, okay, to me, has underachieved. If all he has is one championship, that doesn't seem like a lot for the skill level that this guy has. Won't take away from what he's done, though. 793 goals, and he's been the cornerstone. He'll have a statue right out in front of that stadium, and rightfully so. So I think the world of him. How do I think he would have responded to the original 6? People will criticize me and you all day long. How do you compare one era to another? Well, that's true. Sometimes one's more physical. It's like the NBA, okay? How do you compare the old NBA style, which we really loved, instead of the jump shooting style that many of us don't like? So, I agree with you on the Ovechkin point that he's underachieved, but at least he does have a championship. The Washington Capitals have been a steady franchise that's won a lot. Have they won enough of the talent level? I don't know. That's something that everybody can get. Point. What's your point?
Well, and I'm going to address the 2 points. Let me start out with Ovechkin again. To me, he's like Lionel Messi with Argentina. He can get all the club records he wants, but he'll never be a Diego Maradona because he can't win the exclusive World Cup. And that's the same thing here with Alex Ovechkin. He hasn't made everybody around him better on that team. Sidney Crosby, who has won, 3 championships, has made everybody around him, and anybody that came into Pittsburgh has taken that level and ran with it and won cups with it. And as far as saying Wayne Gretzky didn't play in an era with fighting, what are you talking about? Tiger Williams was in Vancouver. Calgary and Edmonton used to fight all the time. The Flyers were a fighting team back then. If anything's changed and got away from the fighting, it's Alex Ovechkin that really hasn't seen the fight.
Hold on. Yeah, you're great. I mean, and I'll give you the Ovechkin. Don't sit here and tell me, okay? And I've been covering hockey my whole life and been around it, okay?
There's been no fight in the last 5 years compared to when Gretzky was
playing.
But
you know what, Mark? If you go out there and sit here and tell me that Gretzky could have survived what happened in the 70s.
I didn't say he survived. I said there was fighting in his era more so than it is in the Ovechkin era.
But the word you said here, okay, I like this one, more so. Okay, that's a great word. Thank you very much. Okay, more so. Nobody in this day and age, okay, survives what the original 6. There's a book out there, and I think I read part of it called Blood on the Ice. Don't tell me that anybody in this era, or even people in the early 2000s, or even late 90s, would have survived. No way. Now, you also made another point, which I thought was interesting. I didn't believe your soccer knowledge was more than I thought it was.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just, to me, it's one of those things where, I appreciate bringing up Pele, because to me, he definitely was a defining type of guy. But the thing is, to me, Bird and Magic is equivalent, if not more so, to the NBA. Because remember one thing, okay, the NBA was on tape delay. If it wasn't for Bird and Magic, okay, the NBA would still be having their finals at 11.
Scott, the NHL was on a respirator on the West Coast. There was nothing out here, man.
Well, okay, they were on a respirator on the West Coast. West Coast.
The whole West Coast.
The NBA, hold on, Mark. Okay, the NBA to me was on a respirator, period, okay? They were practically bankrupt.
They were still playing basketball in LA. They were still playing basketball in Oakland, the Golden State Warriors with Nate Thurman and Rick Barry and all that. I lived in LA, born in Pittsburgh, lived in Los Angeles when you would draw 6,000 fans during the weeknight, and it was only sell out when the Flyers or Canadians or the Red Wings might come in.
Right.
It was big market teams. The only other team out here in the West Coast was the Vancouver Canucks. There was no Anaheim Ducks. There was no Seattle Kraken. Vegas, Phoenix, all these other teams, San Jose Sharks, the California Golden Seals went to Cleveland. So if you want to sit here and tell me that the NHL was like the NBA, I got to say, you're crazy.
Well, I am crazy, but you know what? I'm still going to tell it to you anyways, because you know what? It took Mark. Well, that's okay. I'm entitled to be crazy. Okay, Mark, okay. I've been crazy for 43 years, and I'll be crazy.
You can't compare the NBA with the NHL. The only teams that were falling apart in the NBA were the Kansas City Omaha Kings and the Buffalo Braves.
Yeah, but anybody that's going to sit here and tell me that a league that's bankrupt under Larry O'Brien, I'm not saying that the NHL wasn't suffering on the West Coast. They certainly needed to get a bigger contract because they needed more West Coast presence. I'm not denying that, okay? We all know that the California Seals wound up merging with the Cleveland Barons, and then they got dissolved by Minnesota later. I understand the history that the West Coast has never been strong. You went from 6 to 12, and all of a sudden now you're up to, what, 30-some-odd teams or whatever?
Well, they're all on solid footing. Arizona is going to get that new stadium, and everybody in the NHL is on solid footing right now. There's no talk of somebody closing up shop like there is in basketball. And well, is the Magic going to leave? You know, or is the Tampa Bay Rays going to leave in baseball? There's no talk in hockey of that. So Wayne Gretzky, to me, is the ambassador. He's done more than, you know, you'd have to look at Bettman and look at what the sum. Now they're not making people. This is the biggest thing you got to really look at, Scott, here in the last 2 minutes of it. That when you look at it, is how are they affording this? You know, they're on solid footing. The players are, you know, making money. The owners are making money. How is the NHL solid with all their teams across the board?
Yeah, well, let me ask you a question. Now that you have that, tell me, do they have a real national TV contract?
They don't have a national TV contract.
Exactly. That's my point. You just made my point. Right. So that's so good. You made my point for me. I love it when you and I go at it. This is beautiful.
So let me ask you, so how are they surviving in Seattle and Vegas where they're selling out the joints and you can't get sellouts in Orlando and some of these other cities that have basketball?
I'm talking about the NBA, Mark, in the 70s and the 80s. Okay, the NBA is struggling now because Adam Silver to me is a puppet and David Stern was the hard-nosed guys that you need. The NBA is struggling now, Mark. Now, not back then when you had stars. You didn't have load management, okay? If you ever need a hashtag for NBA, okay, on all your 9 million shows, put load management on as one of them. Okay, playing tournament. I'm giving you two, okay? And I know you're good at hashtagging. Okay, load management. I'm not talking about today's NBA. I'm talking about the NBA that translated from the late 70s into the 80s and the 90s when it was good, when it was physical basketball, not the hemorrhaging version where you actually need a play-in tournament and all those other things that have gimmicks to get people interested. Right now, the NHL has a better product than the NBA, and they do have a lot better wide geographical range. But let me tell me about the Coyotes. They've been a train wreck ever since they left from Winnipeg all the way to Arizona. I ought to know. I saw a game at the old America West Arena where one of the
let me ask you, Scott, here in the next minute.
Yeah.
Show me who the next guy is going to lead the NBA into the promised land. I'll name you 3 hockey players that can lead the NHL in the next promised land.
You know what? I wouldn't even waste my time on it. How do you like that, Mark?
I'll throw guys: Austin Matthews, Connor McDavid.
No, I'm talking about in the NBA, Mark. I'm not talking about the NBA. To me, I wouldn't. You want to give me 3? Yeah, you definitely have 3 stars if the NHL markets them right and they have a bona fide national TV. I'm not giving you the NBA. I don't really care. Not anymore. I enjoyed it. I have a piece of the Pistons championship floor, Mark, in my hallway, and I am so darn proud of it. It's ridiculous. Back then, when I covered the bad boys, okay, the NHL, from a star standpoint, has a bright future. Their model's good. They may not have a bona fide national television contract outside of cable, but I believe that the NHL is headed in the right direction now. Yep. Now, let me repeat the word now. Hashtag that word too, okay, Mark, than the NBA does. The NBA has a lot of work to do, but back in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, the NBA was good. Unfortunately, now the NHL is a good product, but they also, their salary cap is like 85, 90 million. So it's safe to say they get their money's worth out of these players. So I'm not disputing the NHL. I'm talking about different eras. NBA then and now NHL now. But good spirited debate here. I like spirited debate, and that's what it's all about. But yeah, I have the utmost respect for Alex Ovechkin. And, you know, you have 3 bona fide stars. And again, I think the 3 things that we touched on between Lamarjackson, Dan Snyder, and Ovechkin were certainly things that a lot of people can definitely appreciate. But I'm so proud of the job that Ron Rivera's done. And I actually am sentimentally pulling for the Washington Commanders because of, to me, Taylor Heineke, but most of all, Ron Rivera winning in spite of Dan Snyder. You have to
Yep.
root for a guy like that. Well, anyways, this is fire up. As you can tell, Mark Mancini and I are fired up tonight. So we're definitely trying to make sure we give you everything we've got. No shortage of energy, maybe shortage of time in a moment. But anyways, Mark, with that said, why don't you let everybody know how they can get a hold of you?
XM 203, Sirius 217, WWDB AM 860 out of Philly, and across the board in this wonderful show on Tuesdays. And this should be titled The Bash at the Beltway.
There you go. Send me a text message. I'll be more than happy to title it that way. All right. So meanwhile,
Okay, brother.
give you my information, www.scottssports33.com, at Twitter, at Tribune South. And of course, subscribe to the South Florida Tribune YouTube channel by going to youtube.com, hit subscribe. And I've given you all the iHeart, Apple, Spotify, Google information. On behalf of Madman Mancini, my name is Scott Morgan, Rock Motor City, Manuel. We'll catch you next week. Have a great night, everybody.